Hi everyone, I'm Tally, this is Farrell and we are Bored of It, and welcome to our buyer's guide for the Imperium series, a series of civilization building games for 1 to 4 players which consists of Imperium Classics, Imperium Legends and Imperium Horizons. The Imperium series will put you in the shoes of a real or mythical civilization, and through the core mechanisms of deck building and card cycling, you'll see your civilization grow. This is a game with moderate to high complexity and low interactivity, so it certainly won't be for everyone, but for those who it is for, it will likely be one of their favourite games.
So we have for you the buyer's guide, and if you're new to our buyer's guides, what we're going to do is we're going to begin by presenting a factual approach. We're going to tell you what is the Imperium series, what is it about, how does it play, what content is available for that series, and what do you need to know before you buy. We'll also tell you how it all mixes together if you're worried about can you combine this with that. And then finally, we're going to end by telling you our thoughts on the series, so more of a review style thing, and also recommending in which order to buy it. Then we would like you to know that actually for this series, each game was provided to us by the publisher as a review copy. And also, we would appreciate if you would consider subscribing if you find this helpful, because it will help us grow the channel. And for our buyer's guides, there's usually a lot of work involved, and it's usually by working with a publisher we can make them happen just to get through all the content, although this is a bit of a smaller one than usual, you could say. But please consider it, and with that, we will go to the buyer's guide.
In 2021, publisher Osprey Games released Imperium Legends and Imperium Classics, both by designer duo Nigel Buckle and David Terzi. In 2024, Imperium Horizons followed, also by the same publisher and designers. All are for 1 to 4 players. All 3 games are civilization building card games, each with the same core rule set and mechanisms of deck building, hand management and card cycling. Each civilization, although playing to the core rule set of Imperium, plays fairly asymmetrically in that they will have different cards, how they progress as a civilization can be quite different, and how they play around with all of the mechanisms. At the most basic level, each player will take a different civ deck and set up their own player area. Typically, the cards are divided into different groups, many of which can't be accessed until later on in the game. You'll begin with a deck of unmarked nation cards. Each time you come to the end of this deck and you must reshuffle, you'll get to shuffle in a card from the reserve nation deck. Then, once all of those cards are gone, you'll get to shuffle in the Ascension card, which means that your civilization turns from scattered barbarians into an empire. This then means that certain cards can now enter play, and it may trigger certain effects on other cards. Then, once you need to cycle your hand again and reshuffle, now you get to build developments, and these are very powerful cards, but they do come with a resource cost attached. Generally, a turn will see you start with 5 cards in your hand, 3 action tokens and 5 exhaust tokens. More often than not, you're going to be spending a single action token to play a single card. Usually, these cards will either have an instant action and then get discarded, they could have an instant action but then remain in your tableau, or they get played into your tableau with no instant action. Generally, these last type of cards are activated by playing an exhaust token onto them so that they can be used once per turn. So overall, you're going to be playing and discarding cards to cycle through your deck so that you can get more of your civilization cards into your hand, which will give you more options. And at the same time, you might be acquiring cards from a central marketplace for the same reason. The different civilizations may also generate points in different ways. Some may have more cards which allow you to generate victory point tokens. Some might be more weighted towards getting cards from the common marketplace, where the cards often have victory points printed on them, whilst others may allow you to collect glory cards, which are powerful and high scoring, by sacrificing your tableau. There are multiple ways the game may end. When a player develops their last development card, when the last card is taken from the common marketplace, when one player claims the last glory card or when the unrest deck is empty. For the first 3 conditions, the player with the most victory points will win. However, when the unrest ending is triggered, the player with the least unrest will be the winner. Unrest cards are taken when acquiring common cards, and they are cards which clog up your deck and provide you with negative victory points.
Each game in the series comes with a unique set of civilizations and also unique common cards. And these are the cards which will be neutral, so either player can purchase them from a central marketplace. Both Classics and Legends come with 8 different civilizations, while Imperium Horizons comes with 14. The civilizations in Classics are Carthaginian, Celt, Greek, Macedonian, Persian, Roman, Scythian, and Viking. These are all your Bobby Basic civilizations, ones that existed and most people would have heard of, making Classics arguably the most straightforward Imperium experience. In Legends, you have Arthurian, Atlantean, Egyptian, Moraean, Minoan, Olmec, Jin, and Utopian. These are obviously a mix of mythical and real civilizations, and as such, things are getting a bit weirder here in the sense of gameplay. Horizons is a mix of real-life civilizations you probably haven't heard of, some that you have, and some that are completely made up. You have the Abbasid, the Aksumite, the Cultists, Gupta, Inuit, Japanese, Magyar, Martian, Mayan, Polynesian, Sassanid, Tainio, Tang, and Wagadu civilizations. As this is the third game, it really pushes the boat out with the asymmetry of these civilizations, how they work within the core rule set, and it does feel the most innovative of the 3. Horizons also comes with another lot of little extra bits. So you have player area organizers, not present in the previous 2 games. You have a comprehensive rulebook covering the entire series, which was rewritten for clarity after some complaints about the rulebooks of the first 2 games. You also have kind of errata cards for Classics and Legends, which they kind of fall into different categories. Some are errata, some are to balance the civilizations, and some are just to facilitate the inclusion of the trade routes module, which also comes in Horizons and is a semi-optional module which can be used with any game. And I say semi-optional because some civilizations in Horizons do require it in play to play as those civilizations. The great thing about the Imperium series is that everything goes with everything and it's all very interchangeable. For example, you can take a civilization from any game and pit it against a civilization from any other game. On top of that, each game has its own unique set of common cards, and these are also interchangeable between games as well. So the common cards are the cards that are neutral, they don't belong to a civilization, and they form the central marketplace that players can acquire cards from into their civilization decks. And you could take the common cards from Legends and play it with civilizations from Horizons. Then you also have the Trade Routes module, which comes in Horizons, and this can be played with any of the games, although if you are going to include it with civilizations from any of these games, it's best to also put in those replacement cards that you'll get in Horizons for the previous 2 games, because some of these replacement cards are there to allow those civilizations to work properly with the Trade Routes module. So all in all, everything's extremely versatile if you want to mix things up. So, what do you need to know about the Imperium series? Well, if this is all new to you, the key things to know are that the Imperium series is complex, it is very solitary when you play, and the games are also long in how long it takes to play them. So, while each game in the series is for between 1 and 4 players, generally anyone who plays Imperium will tell you probably only want to play it solo or with 2 players. I mean, if you actually look at the votes on BGG of player counts, the majority of people say not to play it at 3 or 4 players. And this is because it's the type of game where on your turn you do a lot of things. So your turn takes some time, but it doesn't really ever impact the other player. You don't really interact with them. So having more players just extends the play time and also the downtime without giving you anything back in return. Therefore, it's always best to play solo or 2 players. Then on top of that, generally the games do go on quite long. We always play 2 players and the games can be about 2 hours on average. And we obviously know what we're doing in this series after all the times we've played. So while this will change with what civilization you play. If you play a complex one, it will probably take longer to kind of figure out the puzzle. If you play one from classics, it's very straightforward, then you might get it done in 90 minutes. But just beware of these things.
Because of that, a big part of if you will like it or not will be if you demand your board games to have some interaction or whether you just want a great game. The thing with Imperium is, if this type of game is what you like, then probably Imperium will become one of your most beloved games. These civilizations are asymmetric, all playing differently and providing you with a different puzzle. On top of that, within the civilizations, there are multiple routes that can be taken, so the replayability is off the charts. This does add some complexity and it asks players to be adaptable, but the factions are ranked by complexity of playstyle, which is great information to have. Also, it's important that you at least like deck builders, as this is the entire game at its core. Although what is really great about Imperium is it's one of the best examples of deck building in the entire hobby, and it has enough twists and turns to keep even those with just a passing interest in deck building very interested, and it will just grab you in with the gameplay.
One last thing to keep in mind is, as already mentioned, Horizon comes with a set of replacement cards for classics and legends. And it also comes with a comprehensive rulebook, as there were some complaints about the clarity of the rulebooks in the original 2 games. Now, this is something that we just mentioned because some people will be extremely bothered by the knowledge that there are replacement cards and errata that you can get, and others won't care. But now you know. One thing just wanted to add on that just thought of is it's also important that you know that in this game, scoring is going to be pretty rough, about as bad as it gets in any game, because you're going to have a history where you've kind of discarded cards to, you'll have cards in play, you'll have your deck, and you'll have your discard pile, and sometimes it's going to matter where those cards are, and a lot of the scoring will come from kind of points on the cards, and some cards will be like, for every one of this symbol you have, get a point, and then you have to go through, and then it's, if this card is here, do you get that? So you have to sort through a lot of cards, including all the cards you've accumulated across the game, and kind of score, and there's not a really nice, simple, easy way to do it. And it's one of those games that you could score up what you have 3 different times and get 3 different answers, just because of how complex it can be. But it's not the worst thing, but I know this is something that will bother people, so it's better just to tell you about it now. So what do we think? Well, the Imperium series was a series that we knew only a little bit about. We had no experience of before we went into it, but it's really grown on us the more that we played. We weren't, you could say, instantly enamored with it, but we definitely enjoyed it, and then the more you play around with the system and the more you try different things, the more we've enjoyed it.
Definitely agree. Yeah, I thought it was like kind of okay in the beginning, but I thought maybe it was a little bit like repetitive and a bit of a hurdle with all of the kind of keywords that you have to learn, which is quite tough because they all can sound quite similar but maybe have a slightly different kind of meaning in the game. So that's quite tough, but now I really, really look forward to sitting down with a cup of tea and playing this, basically.
Yeah, I think just touching on those keywords is one thing to be aware of, that there's some like odd rules, and the keywords, acquiring card or breaking through for a card, very similar but very different in terms of gameplay, so you want to make sure you get those right. But we started with Imperium Horizons, and because this has that comprehensive rulebook and it's kind of nicely laid out with all the keywords and definitions, it was a great way to learn. It was quite smooth, even though it is somewhat of a complex game. And we've grown to really enjoy this, and we've played all of them. But I think one thing to be aware of is, as much as we enjoy it, we're a couple and we live together. So we spend all the time together, so we don't mind some quiet time and playing this and having a tea, right, and going about it. But it's not something that if we had friends over, we would ever play with them because it's so solitaire.
For sure. Yeah, we even get up and do chores sometimes whilst the other person is taking their turn. There's a lot going on in your turn. It can just take a while to think through all of your actions. So that's definitely something to be aware of, a lot of quiet time.
Yeah, I think the good thing, though, is that if you're into deck builders, this is going to be a highlight for you. I think it showcases the best of deck builders, and the design duo have really created a wonderful system, and it's insane how you can play around within the same rule sets. It's not like this faction necessarily introduces a bunch of new rules you have to learn. They might play a little differently, but they stay within the core rules.
Yeah.
Just the variety on show is really astounding. And
you can just kind of read your faction summary and get right into it, even though they might play in slightly different ways, but it's very easy to get into each one, basically. So I think that's really cool. But turning to maybe a more like buyer's guide element, what one would you say that people should get first?
So I think with this, compared to all of our other buyer's guides, it's the one that is the hardest to kind of recommend how to go about it, because I think there are two equally good options. So you have the first option, which is get Horizons. So Horizons is the biggest game in the series. It comes with the most civilizations. It comes with the trade routes module. So you have kind of extended gameplay. It comes with this comprehensive rulebook. So it's a great introduction. It's how we were introduced into the series. It's also got these replacement cards. So if you decide later on to go and get the other games in the series, you're kind of covered. You can get that errata out, or in, I guess. Then there are a lot of benefits, but the negative is that it's the most expensive game in the series, and the civilizations, because it's the third game in the series, they're a bit weirder, they're a bit more experimental, so it's not the most streamlined way to get in terms of actually playing the game. And if you don't know if you're going to like it yet, it's the biggest investment of the three. So then, on the other hand, we could recommend classics.
Path 2. Go for classics first. There's 8 civilizations in here, but that's still more than enough to have plenty of games. But like you said, the Horizons is a little bit more weirder and experimental. These are, it's called classics, does what it says on the tin. So maybe this is a better route to take if you are a newcomer, if you're maybe a little bit unsure if you are going to like the game or not, because it's just a lot more straightforward to get into. And then maybe at some point you can kind of escalate to Horizons.
I think also Imperium Classics is, I think that and Legends are equally as cheap. So it's also, if you're not sure about it, it's a good price for it. You get 8 civilizations, as you said. And I mean, if you play each one, that's 8 plays. And how many games are you playing 8 times?
Yeah. And as we said, each civilization has like different routes that you can take. So it's not like you've seen everything once you've played as each one. There's definitely loads more to explore with each one. So
that would be option 2. So it's kind of hard to say one over the other because they both have strengths and weaknesses. But it's, what sounds best to you. And then you might also ask, what is your favorite game in the series? And I think that's not a question we're going to answer, basically, because everything's so interchangeable. And, the only difference really is the weirdness. But a civilization within the same game compared to another civilization in that same game, it could be much more fun to play or much less fun to play. It can be much weirder or much more straightforward. So comparing between the games doesn't really work like that because it's almost all one entity.
If you just handed me a civilization, I'm not sure I would know which game it come from. That's how kind of interchangeable they are and how like indistinct they are from each other in a good way, because it means that you can, there's no barrier to entry for each one, basically. I think it's only when you told me, this one's from Horizons, when you're dealing them out, and maybe it's a bit weirder that you say, it is. And you can notice it if someone tells you. But other than that, they're kind of like much of a muchness. Yeah. In a good way.
So we wouldn't say one's our favourite. And I think the last thing to kind of end on is, you might ask, do you need all 3? And I would say no, definitely not. Because I think one of the strong points that we've mentioned repeatedly now is just the variety in one box because you have all these different civilizations, and then, you know, to play each of them once is at minimum 8 plays, 14 if you do Horizons, and then replaying them, finding the different routes, mastering them, that's another lot of plays, right? So if you have one, there is a lot of content to get out of it, but it's also not of the type of thing where if, like, we have 3 now, that would be like, well, let's just give this one to a friend and keep this one. We want them all, right?
We want them. Yeah, for sure.
You want to be the different factions. You want to have the different common cards and switch them out between the games. We want to explore it. So, you know, there's plus and minus, but it's just, if you don't feel like you're missing out because you don't have all 3, but you also don't have to worry if you love it enough that you do want to get all 3, that you know, there's not much point. It's perfectly worth getting it.
Yeah.
But it's just up to you, basically. So, any final words on Imperium?
Yeah, just like you said, something that really grew on me. It was a bit of a slow burner, but now that it has burned through, I really, really love it, and I really look forward to playing it, and I'm hoping that we're going to play a game right after filming this.
It makes me laugh, actually, because I think, like you touched upon, I think the first time or two you moaned a bit about it getting repetitive, and now it's like your most commonly requested game to play.
Yeah, when you give me options for things to play, I'm like, I could play Imperium. Just really like the feeling of sitting down and kind of working on something for myself when it's just me and you. So yeah, it's very satisfying in that way as well.
Okay, so that was our buyer's guide for the Imperium series. We really hope that it was helpful. And if it was, please consider subscribing. If you're not already, please comment if you have any questions. We really appreciate it, and it's going to help us grow the channel. And we're also happy to answer any questions you might have about that series. And if you want something more short, more bite-sized, you can check us out on Threads, Bored of It, where we post more funny stuff, a lot less serious than we are here.
You do say so yourself.
Yes, I do find myself hilarious. But most importantly, we really appreciate you watching, and we'll see you next time.